I was in my mid-teens. I was lucky enough by some twists of fate to discover art that would keep me going throughout the entirety of my life to this very day. Punk and thrash metal, slightly more mainstream in the sort of horror genre, always slightly more cerebral horror I've enjoyed. I can't say I've ever liked the kind of hack and slash movies, but I like horror films that are good films, not good horror films. The hippie anarcho-punks that I met through having a very early interest in the idea of animal rights, heard some very interesting music through them. One album that has stayed with me, and indeed I've got tattoos associated with the album. It's an album called In Darkness There Is No Choice by a band called Antisect. And I was lucky enough in my last year of school that a guy who moved from London into the area that I was schooling in, and he came to my school, a guy called Martin. He was into the kind of burgeoning speed metal scene, and he opened my eyes to a whole new world, you know. Noisy, fast music with intricacy and precision. It was a real revelation to me, because I turned out I enjoyed that a whole lot more than I did punk. I always found it a little bit simplistic and a little bit crass, no pun intended, on the sort of lyrical level. And back then there was no internet, everything was manual, everything that you discovered was generally of your own sort of hit and miss, trial and error. Go and buy an album because you think the cover looks good and then realise it's a terrible one. The thing in the metal scene that is still very much part of it today is the kind of artwork that's associated with really intricate, intelligent metal is also associated with glam rock. And I don't know how many albums I bought on the off chance back in the day that I deeply regretted, and then occasionally one in every 10 albums you'd find an absolute gem. And yeah, I lived in a small village up until my mid-20s actually, and all of the discoveries were completely off my own back, except for this one friend at school. And back then, if you got into something, there wasn't the sort of front that people put on now. They'll discover a movement or a style of music through the internet that sort of fills in the blanks of having no confidence in maintaining and projecting your own personality. And I lived in a village, and I would put money with 100% confidence on the fact I'm the only person in that village who'd ever heard of say a band like Slayer back in the early mid 80s. And there is a deeper rhythm to this. You know, I was very aware from getting albums like Hello 8 by Slayer what the Los Angeles speed metal scene looked like, and it looked so much fun and looked so cool to me, and I could only ever fantasize about it. You know, eventually I did start going to gigs in London, but they were very few and far between and very rare, because it was just such a long journey. You know, it was a 2-hour train journey, and you'd always have to leave the gig early because the last train at night was 10 to 11. And it was a fascinating time, and if anything, it's got a little bit more romance and a little bit more of risk and reward than people have today. Because anything you ever hear, you know, in all honesty, I prefer it, but there is a romance attached to that part of my life, where everything was a sort of discovery of your own. The risk and reward was pretty low, but when you did find something which moved you, boy, was it satisfying. Now everything is just available on tap, and you know, as I said, I like it, but there are buts associated with it. Speaking as a man here, I know one of the things that we've lost along the way is the whole satisfaction of what we were here to do, which is hunt and gather. That side of our instinct is just not satisfied in any way, shape or form. Everything's supplied for us, and I think that can go into the way in which we discover art and culture and everything like that. Everything is just piped to you. Discernment is something which people don't have to worry about too much. People won't sift through with any great depth of genres they discover and go any further or deeper, because there's just ad nauseum amounts of bile that's available in any given genre that would probably get people sort of moved to a point where they think, yeah, I kind of like this, and they really never get to that point where they have their goosebumps standing up and their spine tingling when they hear something that truly moves them. You know, I think that mediocrity and banality, there's a lot of that on the surface that a lot of people think is as far as a movement, a genre, an idea goes. And back in the day, if you met a like-minded person into punk or metal, you were going to have so much in common, you truly were. And now I think it's been a bit diluted. You know, I think that there was something to be said for the hunter-gatherer days of even just finding music, culture, movies. You know, I do think that we've lost something along the way. When I met this school friend Martin, he introduced me to this record shop in Wardour Street in London called Shades, which sold loads and loads of underground punk and metal, all from America, you know, well, global. And that was a 2-hour train journey into London from the small village I lived in to get there. There was such commitment required to be into what I was into. It doesn't make me any better or any worse than anyone else, but it's kind of proved that I was genuinely heartfully in it, you know. I'm very aware of how every generation gets to their middle years and starts to remind the world, kids these days, they've got it damn sight easier than we did. But I really don't see it that way. I think that the proliferation of information and content has ruined a lot of the magic, I really do. Realising eventually that buying a magazine, say like Kerrang, the heavy metal magazine, you could find, yet again, as with buying albums at random, you could find one story about something of interest, about a band with some gumption. You know, 90% of the magazine was absolute cock rock nonsense, but you'd always find that one interesting piece of information about a new act. Being into what I was into, it's the same for me and many other people. You had to kiss a lot of toads before you found your prince, musically and culturally speaking. And there was this whole counterculture of there's even a sort of whole financial system that existed underneath the surface of going out and having to take a chance on albums. I can remember getting a dodgy album, say, not knowing a thing about a name like, say, Motley Crue. And I'd get an album which would melt my ears with boredom and loathing. And you couldn't take the album back once you bought it, but you could take it into Canterbury, jump on the train and go and sell it to a guy called Dave in an indoor market which sold hippie tapestries, joss sticks. You could get your ears pierced there. It was a bazaar, you know. And you could go there and get a couple of quid for the album that admittedly cost you 4 or 5, but he gave you a fair price for it. Yeah, there was just this whole underground culture which is just long dead now, you know, and nothing can replace that kinship of just chatting to, you know, even the guy you sell these records to. Well, you come a lot in with a lot of these sort of like soft metal albums. Are you not into it? Why do you have so many? Oh, well, I'm into, you know, this new thing from America, thrash metal. And oh yeah, I've heard all about that. I've got a couple of albums here, you know, and you'd end up in a conversation and maybe instead of him selling you, you know, you selling your stuff to him, you'd end up doing a trade and going home with another couple of albums, and yet again maybe a stinker, maybe something that would change your life. It's how I first heard Metallica's Master of Puppets, was going in with a copy of, I think it was Dr. Feelgood, and I 1-for-1 swapped it for Master of Puppets. But yeah, it's a culture and a counterculture that is now long dead because of the internet. Like a lot of things, you know, just everyday village shops. We all know how the high street is dying. But yeah, I miss those days of high risk, low reward. But when you did find something which, in amongst, say, 10 albums of absolute nonsense, you found your gem. It really was like finding a diamond after investing so much time and finance into lost ventures, fruitless ventures. It was a good time, and it involved a lot of commitment. And so, you know, coming from a small village, I can guarantee Yeah, there were a couple of other people actually eventually, because of me, thinking back, sort of understood and quite liked the genre, or they liked it to a vague level compared to me, or a lesser level. And you know, it was a good time. And there was just so much do-it-yourself going on. People starting bands, and you know, I did myself, and playing gigs, and the whole counterculture, the whole counterculture involved with and surrounding it is just gone now, and it is such a shame. I really don't feel that, you know, on the surface, you'd think that sort of proliferation of cultural availability would be a good thing, but it really isn't. We're just awash with complete and utter nonsense, and I think it's affected people's ability to discern. As I say, they'll only go so far down a route with a genre, and well, it's a potential thing. I just don't like to think the world is truly as lost culturally as it seems to be at times. Maybe I'm kidding myself. And I'm split down the middle completely. You know, the other night I said to myself, I absolutely love the technology of this age. I was watching Netflix, using my PlayStation, downloading a game, and had Spotify playing on in my hall, as I always do. My house, except when I'm sleeping, always has the sound of music. Not literally the sound, not Julie Andrews bellowing away. You know? Materially speaking, I've got nothing of that time to show anymore. Don't possess any of it. All of the albums, all of the VHS videos, all of them were sold. Between the ages of about 14 and 21, I amassed a massive collection of, well, nearly said CDs then, but they came years later. You know, I amassed a large collection of vinyl, tapes and videos and the like. All very rare, well, some of them very rare. And I got rid of them all in 1991 on August the 22nd, my birthday. Somebody contacted me and said, do you want a ticket to go to the Reading Festival? And in the spirit of punk and in the spirit of freedom, I guess, looking back, it shows how I was more connected to events and joy than I was possessions. And this is where the internet's, you know, come into its own for me in later life, because I've got nothing of that time, no music, nothing. Got rid of it all. But yeah, somebody phoned me up and said, I've got a ticket to the Reading Festival, do you want to go? And all of my newfound friends were going, and it was one of the best weekends of my life as well that followed. It was my birthday, and I took every album I owned into Canterbury, into that indoor market, and sold the lot, enough to cover my ticket, my train ticket to the festival. I didn't even have a tent, you know, I just went through caution to the wind, and I often wonder where that guy's gone. You know, was I really ever capable of doing that, being that devil-may-care and that cavalier? But there's been a few times in my life, up until 39 years old, where I just dropped everything and abandoned it. All material, everything that I owned for love, you know, and I'm pleased about that, and I regret it not a jot. I was living quite comfortably and happily in South London. Somebody came along through this YouTube channel, because of this YouTube channel, and we ended up living together for 10 years and having a daughter. Do I regret that? My God, no. Do I regret giving everything up in 2007 for somebody who I very erroneously thought I was in love with? No, I don't regret any of it for a second. I've always followed my heart, and it wasn't easy that day getting rid of all my albums, but there was never a regret. It was one of the happiest times in my life, and there's a lesson there for all of us. You know, I'm surrounded by all this now, this finery and basic sort of household comfort, and at this point in my life I require it. I've got a lot of responsibilities. I have a daughter, responsibility to myself, and my desires are not like they were when I was 20 years old. You know, they're lovely memories to keep you warm in the cold winter of middle age, you know, but it's just something which I look back on with a lot of fondness and joy. The proliferation of culture, content, YouTube channels, latterly, bands, music, it's just a shit show and a clusterfuck of mediocrity. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. Take care.